Hi, Jim.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, nice for you to come onto the podcast. Thank you so much. You've spoken a lot about. I've tried to set this up, and thankfully you're here, so that's the main thing. The reason I have you on is because I first heard about you through Coherence when I watched that on Netflix all those years ago, and I thought it was a brilliant film. And then I've been observing your career since and wondering what else did you do before and what else you've done after. I'm trying to get more independent filmmakers on this podcast. Although we talk about everything, that's one of the things I'm trying to do. So I'm glad you're here. Before we start, like I do with every guest, can you just explain a bit about yourself and basically your journey in film up until this point?
Yeah, well, I'm a filmmaker and sort of been having one foot in big Hollywood productions, helping other directors make their dreams come true, but then also doing my own much smaller projects where I got to be a lot more independent and a lot more self-controlling, self-motivating, of course, and just kind of not having to go through the all the hoops and all the heartbreak of the film industry, and just sort of took the power upon myself to make things. And that seems to be what I'm asked about mostly, is how I was able to get something made in this world where there's so many gatekeepers that are blocking the path of filmmakers.
Mhm.
And so, I started out as a storyboard artist. When I was right out of school, I was um, supporting my filmmaking habit by storyboarding for Michael Bay or Ben Stiller or Gore Verbinski or other directors that were kind of transitioning into uh, feature films out of after doing smaller things. And I learned a lot from those directors, and I'd always sort of go to set and see what they were doing, and try to learn about how things are made on a large scale, so that I could then scale it down to something that was much smaller. And so yeah, I've made things that are gigantic, like Pirates of the Caribbean with Gore Verbinski, but then I've also made things that are just a crew of two or three people in my own house. And Coherence came out over 10 years ago, and somehow every year it gets more popular just by word of mouth,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a sort of a weird, wonderful sort of anomaly that I get to watch, and and get to talk to people, especially aspiring filmmakers. That seems to be mostly who reaches out to me, and so I just try to make myself available when I can, to share how we did it.
Okay. Just going on, you mentioned Gore Verbinski there, and for those who don't know, you were the storyboarder for Pirates of the Caribbean, I think the first one. How did that come about? Well, actually, before you answer that, weren't you the first person that was hired by Verbinski for that film?
Yeah, I had known Gore Verbinski for a few years because he was a commercial director, and I was right out of school, and he's a little older than me, but we hit it off very quickly. We had very similar sensibilities. And so when he started directing movies like Mouse Hunt and The Ring, he would call me up, and he'd say, "Look, I know you're directing now yourself, but do you want to be a part of my film project?" And I'd always say yes. And I started directing commercials, and then Gore called and he said, "You're not going to believe this. Jerry Bruckheimer wants to do $100 million version of Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'd like you to be the first person on board." And so he hired me, and I said yes, of course, and went on the very first scout for Pirates of the Caribbean with Gore and a couple of the producers, which was fascinating and amazing. This is before Johnny Depp was even hired, before we knew who the cast was, before we really knew what it was going to be. And looking back now, even something like that is so unique. Being a storyboard artist asked to be on the very first scout. I don't think that happens almost ever, even on a big movie. And so I was just very grateful for these windows I got to have into various worlds, which is kind of my favorite thing about filmmaking is getting to see these different windows into the world.
How how does someone get into film? Because it's often something I've wondered myself, whether you go to university and do a film course or you decide to skip that and do things independently. I've never understood what the actual path is to getting into filmmaking. It's just one of those things where you have to raise money yourself initially and do like a short film. Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the people out here obviously they moved to Los Angeles because that's where the majority of American films are being made, so that they're around it. You know, they're in it every day. Their friends are talking about it, and little by little, people would figure out how can they fit in. Is it as a producer? Is it as a director? Is it as a crew member? Is it as a writer? Is it as a development person? So, yeah, normally I'd say if you want to be in the Hollywood machine, you would have to physically move your body to Los Angeles, I guess New York maybe, but really Los Angeles, and for a few years get your bearings and then figure out where you can make a difference or where you can be part of something. Or you can do like Sean Baker did or other filmmakers and just start making your own stuff and ignore Hollywood completely. And that's much more feasible today than it ever has been because you can get the cameras and you can get the editing equipment anywhere in the world. You couldn't do that 15 years ago. You couldn't be living in some remote town and say you want to make a feature film. It's just not technologically possible. But today you can. So I think there's going to be a lot more filmmakers coming out of that model in the future where you just have a passion and nothing's going to stop you. You are going to make a film.
Interesting you mentioned Sean Baker's name there because I was listening to some YouTube channel earlier today, and it was we were talking about him and Brady Corbett, who directed The Brutalist as well. And obviously those two films done reasonably well at the Oscars a couple of weeks ago. But neither what both of them have said is neither of them made that much money from their success in terms of box office themselves. I think Brady Corbett said he was living on a paycheck that was paid to him 2 to 3 years ago. I mean, how can that be where a film that's successful at the biggest film award ceremony in the world, how can they not be making any money from it? To me, doesn't make any sense. I know the economics of film have changed because you don't have like DVD sales isn't as big a thing as it used to be, but still, that just seems very bizarre to me.
Yeah, well, because the director especially is usually the last person that's paid. And so, on my film, I learned the hard way that even if our film makes money for other people, like our film made money eventually around the world. Like all the distributors made money, the salespeople made money, the theaters made money. So, but they all get paid first. The last people to get paid back are the filmmakers. So, and by that time, it's a trickle. And by that time the trickle comes, you owe it to the people that gave you favors. Your editor did you a favor by working on it for 2 months, so you owe them. Or your lawyer said, oh, I'll do this for free, but you owe me when it makes money. So I even though this trickle of money ended up coming back to us, I owe that money to other people first before I get anything. So I'm literally the last person to get paid.
I'm a writer. I've written one, goes through to my autobiography. I'm currently doing one at the moment. And the thing with, I remember a few years ago going to a festival to do writers, and as a children's author, he's been doing children's books since the late 80s. And he was talking about payment for them. And he got a piece of paper and he ripped it in half and then ripped half and half again. He said, that's how much I used to get paid. It's basically 25%. He said, now this is how much I get paid. He got a corner from that piece of paper and just ripped it and said, that's how much I get paid.
Yeah.
And it's decrease and increase. And I say that because from what you're saying about directors, is that the same in, unless you do like a massive Hollywood blockbuster, is that almost the same with directors now? Is that they've been getting paid less and less as like the years have gone on?
No, I don't think it's less and less. I think it's always been um, tiny. I mean, you can get residuals in the past
Yeah.
because if you did a movie or a TV show, it was built into if you're a union director, that you get a residual. But now Netflix and Amazon have figured out a way around that. So you don't get anything, you don't get any residuals. So Yes, in that sense, it is less and less because the big companies have figured out a way to avoid that. But otherwise, the only way to get, to get money is to get it up front. And when you sign on to do, Harry Potter 3, you're like, okay, pay me millions of dollars up front because you know you're never going to see anything after the fact.
Yeah, I mean that must be awful. Like, especially when you're first starting out, it's like, how can you start out with that unless you're someone who's come a wealthy background or is very good actually funding, which is another question I was going to ask you. How did you fund Coherence? Because that's something that interests me, like in terms of independent films. I mean, here in the UK, it's probably slightly different because I think some filmmakers almost expect like almost a grant from the government, which I'm not saying is a bad thing,
Yeah.
but I imagine in America there may be something like that, but you may have to do some of it yourself. Like, how does it?
No, there's nothing like that.
There's nothing like that now.
Government's not going to give you any money. That would be amazing. I'd be making films every year if that were true. Um, on Coherence, I paid for it out of my pocket up front because it was so crazy cheap. Um, it, we were going to buy a car. My wife was pregnant, and I was like, okay, I saved a little money. We're going to buy a car. But instead of buying a car, I said, honey, I think I'm going to make a movie. And she's like, well, then you're going to drive our tiny little Yaris. And that was the deal. I was like, instead of buying a new car to have a baby, I had to agree to drive this tiny two-door car that I could barely fit in. Um, so instead of buying a car, I paid for my movie. And then once that was shot, I showed it to my sister, who has nothing to do with Hollywood, but she had been helping raise money for nonprofit organizations like theaters and art galleries and things up in San Francisco. And she said, I think I can show this to people and raise enough investor money to help you finish it. So that was the trick, is I had to shoot the movie first to convince people to help me finish the movie.
That's a very risky business model because it could all obviously go wrong.
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely say to people, don't ever do that. Don't do what I did. It's a terrible, terrible idea. I was, just desperate to make a movie. I had an inflated sense of my talent, and I just, I believed I could do it, but I could never suggest that as a legitimate way to make a movie.
So knowing what you know now, because I'm going to think you've done TV since then, directed TV episodes and whatnot. But knowing as you know now, if say you decide to direct another film, would you think of other avenues in terms of payment, like a crowdfunding or I don't know, people in the industry may be able to help you in that respect?
For me, no. For me, I did it exactly the right way. In hindsight, it was perfect. It all worked out because it turned out it it was a good movie, and it hit. It got into the festivals. So I wouldn't do anything different in hindsight. I just wouldn't suggest it for other people.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I say I'm surprised because after seeing that, and especially if you work on Pirates of the Caribbean, even though like you storyboarder, people didn't look at that and thought, oh, he's done this. He's been on big movie sets. Why don't we hire him to do something? Did that ever conversation ever come up, or and if it did, was it one of those where you thought, I'm not sure about a big studio way of doing things?
No, I was never offered anything from a big studio. I actually directed a lot more before I did Coherence. I was directing commercials and music videos, and I did some TV, but I never got offered another job after directing a movie that became an international cult film. I never got another offer. Still haven't to this day.
I'm surprised because I know certain streaming services they'll put on their platforms a lot of independent films. I'm surprised directors haven't come together and said, actually, similar to what writers do with writer strikes, where they'll say, actually, this isn't working, or have they? I don't know about it, but I say, actually, we need to change the model here because Hollywood's just not going to survive otherwise.
Yeah, we don't have any leverage, so there's nothing you can do about it. People say, well, if you don't like it, then go work at an office.
Yeah, there's no directors union or anything like that.
There's a directors union, but that's for working directors who are already being paid to direct.
Oh gosh, yeah. That hopefully things change in that regard. And you mentioned TV as well, directed some TV episodes. What are the fundamental differences between directing TV and directing film?
I don't know. If you get hired to direct TV, it's very different because I did that before I did Coherence. I got hired just as a guest director. And it's odd that they even call it director because the difference is so vast. When you're making a film as the director, you are the filmmaker. It's your vision and you're in charge. When you do television, the writer is in charge. The writer is the decision maker on all things. The director is just a guest who comes in for 8 days to direct a show, but they don't have any power. They don't have any power for the tone or the look of it or any creative decisions. They're just sort of saying when to stop or when to start. So that was very interesting to me, the learning curve and getting to see the vast difference between those two things. So when I did my show, Shatter Belt, that came out just a few months ago, I did that much more like a filmmaker. That was, even though it was a TV show, it was my idea. I wrote it, I cast it, I was the showrunner. So that was much more just like making a film.
You mentioned your own TV show there. Do you want to talk a little bit about it and which platforms you can see it on?
Yeah, I in America it's on Apple and Amazon. I think it's on those in the UK. I'm not sure, but it's called Shatter Belt, and it's just right now 4 episodes, so very short, 30-minute episodes, kind of like a Twilight Zone or a little bit like Black Mirror maybe, but it's not quite so techy. They're all just very short stories about some kind of odd glitch in the universe or some kind of cosmic anomaly going on and human reaction to it. The theme is always consciousness and our relationship to being conscious beings in the world. So it's got a little bit of coherence in it. If you liked Coherence, you'll recognize some of the actors from Coherence. You'll recognize some of the style. But each story, it's its own self-contained story. You can start with episode 2 if you want. People seem that seems to be the favorite. So it doesn't matter what order you watch them in. And we're hoping to make a lot more if we can get some kind of support from the fans.
Absolutely. How did you find the actors to work on Coherence, and how did they find that filming process?
Well, the actors for Coherence were just all people that I could call up and say, "Can you meet me at my house next week? Trust me, there's no script. We're going to do an experiment, but it should be really fun." And that's it. And I had to just go with people that I knew, people that I had just worked with, and then sort of picked people who seemed like they could be couples or friends, and just knowing that they had the personalities that could mesh with each other. They didn't really know each other yet. They just all knew me, and so as soon as they arrived, I had to explain to them, okay, you two are married, you two are friends, you two used to date, and they just had to kind of improvise from there. And they eventually really loved it. I think at first, the first day, they were very nervous because they didn't know what was in store. They didn't know if there was a whole, they didn't quite realize there was a whole story planned for them. But I think by the second or third day, they started really relaxing into it and they started really having a good time because it became clear that there was a whole thing that had been very carefully planned, that all they had to do is react to it as opposed to generate their own story. I think at first they felt the pressure that they had to generate the story. And by the third day they realized, no, you just have to hold on for the ride.
Yeah, it's interesting the different ways directors work. So obviously the way you've just described your working then, and obviously you got someone like Mike Lee over here who will tell actors like the outline, but then when he brings them together and do rehearsals, that's what they base the script on. And it's really interesting how each person works. I was just thinking, actually, you've obviously directed your own film, directed your own TV series. and obviously there's similar themes there, but especially seems to be a science fiction theme. Is that what you tend to go for, like sci-fi, or you just don't restrict yourself to any genre? It just happens to be those two what you explored.
Think for now, yeah, for now, the science fiction element is the thing that kind of gives it a little specialness. I really love just humans interacting with each other, but if there's some kind of special element going on, whether that's science fiction or some kind of thriller element or whatever it is, I think I'm a little more drawn to that than just a straight ahead drama. Although I've read a couple scripts that had, just drama in them that were amazing, and I'd love to get a chance at that. But for now, because Coherence had such a great reaction to it, I think that's what I have to use to get the next job or two and to see if I can sort of build some kind of momentum like that. And Shatter Belt was really fulfilling in that way because you get to tell all different kinds of stories. And the thing that's tying them all together is this little weird science fiction existential philosophy question, I guess, about existence.
Obviously, we talked about how difficult it can be to make a film, but what is your opinion in terms of the state of independent cinema in the US? Because I try and watch as many independent films as I can over here. You have like BFI Player, which is a British Film Institute player. They have films on there. Obviously, you've got Amazon and stuff like that. And there's some really nice, really good films on there, which probably don't get the recognition they deserve. So I just wanted to know, you're a lot closer to the film scene than me. What are your thoughts on the independent film scene in the US in terms of the quality of films that are coming out?
Yeah, it's up and down. Obviously, every year, you get a whole different batch, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. And I feel like lately they're getting better, perhaps. I think that there's some kind of, for a while, there was the factor of just being a solid story was missing for me for a lot of films, and just having some kind of entertainment value in the old school Hollywood version of it. I think that my goal is to make something that is both entertaining and somewhat, you know, uh, independently minded and even challenging in terms of not just being the same typical thing. Uh, eh, I don't know. I have no idea what the ratio is of films being made right now, but I know it's really hard to get into a theater.
Yeah.
Obviously in the 90s, there was kind of this resurgence of independent films, or maybe a renaissance, or the golden age of independent films. But ever since then, every year is different. Every year, uh, they might make some great ones, or they might get very nervous and really restrict them. So I don't know. I just know from my own point of view, going to meetings and meeting people and hearing what they're looking for. And it seems especially conservative right now, just because people don't want to risk any money at all, and so are only gonna they're only gonna greenlight things that seem like a surefire hit, so that it's a famous director, or it's a genre movie that's gonna make its money back. Um, it's very tricky to read minds. They don't say what they're really looking for, so you just have to have the meetings and see if they're interested in what you've got.
Yeah, because a lot of films I watch tend to be some European, but a lot of them from the Far East, specifically Japan and South Korea. But yeah, for the last 20 so years, especially in the early 2000s, a lot from South America. And it seemed to be a lot more inventive, a lot more risk taking in those films, whereas American films, especially the mainstream ones, they don't seem to be like that anymore. Big ones, would
Yeah.
that be a fair assessment to say?
Yeah, from my point of view, yeah, for sure. Just because, we don't have government funding at all, which means every single film they make has to be a commercial venture, which means they're going to try to reduce their risk, which means they're not going to do risky films.
Mm. So bear in mind, you talk about risk. Why are a lot of these blockbusters so expensive, like 200, 300 million, and that they're barely breaking even? That just seems a, I know we haven't got, like I said, the DVD model and that so, but it just seems a crazy way of just financing films.
Well, is your question why is a blockbuster so expensive?
Yeah, yeah. Why is it, why do blockbusters cost, say, 200 million or 300 million? That just seems crazy to me.
I can tell you the money goes quick. Once you're at that level, it sounds like a lot of money, but it instantly goes away if you're paying your lead actors, 20 million and 10 million and 10 million. Right there's $40 million right off the bat just for three people. So that's a fifth of your budget right there is gone just in those three actors. And then if your director is getting $10 million, you know what I mean? And the producers are the rights, the rights to Harry Potter are not cheap. So you're paying J.K. Rowling, you're paying the estate of James Bond or whatever. All of those things have to be paid before you can even start making the movie. So by the time you're actually making the movie, you have much, much less money than that. That sounds like a lot, but that's not how much the movie costs. That's how much it costs just to get the rights and just to get the people involved. The movie itself is only going to be, 60 or 70 million. And that goes quick if you're making a blockbuster movie with special effects and all the travel and all the hotels and all the food and all the props and costumes and sets. That goes very quickly, very quickly. Think about just songs for a movie. If you have a movie with a lot of hit songs, millions of dollars right there.
Would you say, and obviously you know better than me, there's a lot of bloat in terms of movie budgets now, be it executive producers, sensitivity readers, and all these other titles, and then you got Entourage as well. Has that added to the budget over the last couple of decades?
Uh, I doubt it. I mean, even if it's a blockbuster movie, I can tell you from experience, there are people watching every penny of the budget and fighting you over it and saying, "Hey, we're not going to pay this extra person. We're not going to pay this extra thing. We're not going to do this." So, not really. Even blockbuster movies are trying to control the costs, and they're always weighing, like, all right, is it really worth paying this actor $20 million to come on? And they'll only say, yes, we're going to pay that actor that much if they factor in, well, we'll probably make more. Well, it's probably worth it because the movie will make more. So they're making decisions based on what they are projecting is going to increase the value. So even on Pirates of the Caribbean, I didn't see any waste on Pirates. I saw giant sets. I saw giant, lavish events, but all that was strategic. There was always a strategy to it of saying this is going to help make the movie money. And they were right. It actually did. It made billions of dollars.
Obviously, from what you're saying, you've been a fan of film for obviously since you were young. What filmmakers inspired you, or movies inspired you to actually get into the movie industry?
Oh, everybody. I mean, obviously, when you're a kid and you see Star Wars and you're just like, oh my God, like that was a huge one. But then, Terry Gilliam movies really kind of
Yeah.
made me go, oh, so you can have a very, very personal, idiosyncratic point of view and still make a great movie. Um, I loved musicals when I was a kid. I loved the color of these old Hollywood movies and how much effort went into them, the singing and the dancing and the choreography and the set design. Those were very impressive to me. And then on the other end, what Rod Serling did with no money when he made The Twilight Zone. I was just blown away by the level of creativity when you have limitations on you. Because the Twilight Zone original TV series was one of the lowest budget things you could imagine. So all he had was his imagination and great writing when he was writing those. So that was incredibly inspiring for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I think he's a biography of him's coming out soon. Ron Sterling, as you say. I actually think he's very underrated. as a writer. I have an association with the Twilight Zone, but I think he worked on a few films, if I'm not mistaken, as like a script editor. I
Sure.
actually wrote the script as well.
Yeah, he helped on Planet of the Apes and other things like that. And he's just a genius. And I don't know if he's underrated. I think people who know about him rate him extremely high. He just might be underknown.
Hmm.
Uh, he might not be quite as much of a name as he should be, but the people who do know him really revere him.
Yeah. So film festivals, I've never been to one. Obviously got the obvious ones on this side of the pond, like Cannes or the Venice Film Festival, Berlin, etc. How is there still do you still have a strong influence in terms of certain films being shown and being put up for awards? Has their influence actually dwindled over the years?
Yeah, well, if you're an independent filmmaker, so what you want is to get reviewed.
Hmm.
Because if you get reviewed, then people will know about your film, right? You don't have a budget to promote your film. No one's going to see posters for your film anywhere.
Hmm.
So literally the only way people are going to know about your film is online, right? That's the only way people are ever going to know your film exists. And the only way they'll know that it is online is that someone is writing about it because they saw it somewhere. And the only place they're going to see it in a venue that gets an actual review is a film festival. So that's why they're crucial, is because if you don't have film festivals, literally no one will ever know about your movie. So for us, we took our film to this festival, this amazing festival called Fantastic Fest, that's run by Tim League in Austin, Texas. And it's such a great festival because the audience is so smart and they know movies inside and out. They know movies better than the filmmakers know movies. And when they love a movie, they talk about it and they talk about it online and it gets reviewed if you do well at a film festival. So our film got this tidal wave of support at Fantastic Fest. And because of that, it started this online awareness where people wanted them to see the film because people were talking about it at Fantastic Fest. And then other film festivals wanted to show it because it won awards at Fantastic Fest. So suddenly you're now in 50 festivals, and each of those festivals has somebody reviewing it and has the audience coming and talking about it. So that's really why film festivals are key to an up and coming filmmaker, is because it's the only way reasonably that anyone is ever going to know about your film. And you want to get reviewed. If you have a good film, obviously. If you don't have a good film, then that's too bad. But if you have a good film, you want people to get to review your film and tell everybody you got to go run out and see it.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause like I said, I've never been to any of the main film festivals, and so obviously you've got awards like the Palme d'Or, which still hold reverence, on both sides of the pond actually. And I don't know about films. I mean, one of the things I always think about is with cinema here or theatres, i.e., where you go to get watch a film. They've seems to have dwindled in over the years in terms of seems to be less of them, or they don't show independent films as much as they used to. Would you say that's part of the issue in terms of what cinemas show now, and not only what cinemas show, but also the length of time like a film will be in the cinema?
I'll be honest, I don't know anything about that. My film came out 10 years ago, so I have no
Yeah.
idea what the current state of that kind of question is.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I just mean that because yeah, because seems like with blockbusters seem to be like in cinemas for like 4 or 5 weeks, and then literally the month after in streaming. So I imagine people will go in there and think, well, why would I pay to go watch it when it's going to be on streaming a month
Yeah.
later? And again, that must
Yeah,
affect, yeah.
it's a question, and especially COVID really kind of trained people to stay at home and just have the content come to them. And, there's this massive epidemic of depression in the world right now, and it's linked to lack of connection and lack of community and lack of being in the world. And people have traded convenience for fulfillment and for connection. So the more convenient things get, the sadder we're going to be, and the more depressed life is going to be. So I don't really know if there's an antidote to that because all of the technology today is built to keep you at home staring at your phone, which they know causes massive depression, but it also gets you addicted to more of that. To say, oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm so sad. I guess I need to look at my phone more, and maybe I'll watch something that'll cheer me up. So it's just a loop that technology has created. I don't really see any counter movement to that yet. I hope that it comes. Obviously, I hope that people start going to the theater again, because going to the theater is so much more about just watching the movie. It's about meeting up with your friends and going out to dinner beforehand, or walking together to the theater, or hanging out afterwards, or bumping into people that you weren't expecting to see at the theater and all talking about the movie afterwards. All that's gone when you just stay home watching a movie on your phone.
Yeah, I think it was David Lynch who once says you've never really watched a film that should be unless you've watched it at the cinema. So you might think you have, but you haven't because you've not experienced it how it should be experienced.
Yeah, and the filmmaker, if you are making a film, certain films, I mean, some filmmakers are literally just making them for the phone today because they don't care. But if you are a filmmaker, your final product was meant to be seen giant and very loud with 5.1 sound. So if you think you're watching what that filmmaker wanted you to watch, you're not. You're watching a fifth of it. You're watching a tiny percentage of what the actual format was meant to be. This just happened a few months ago. We showed Coherence in a theater, uh, and luckily the word got out, and so it was completely sold out.
Mhm.
Hundreds of people in the theater, packed, and the movie came on, giant and loud, and we had mixed it for a theater. That was part of the costs 10 years ago. I always knew that I wanted to play in a theater, so it was perfectly calibrated to play on theatrical speakers, so it sounded amazing, it looked beautiful, and the audience was absolutely blown away, because I don't think there was a single person in that audience that had seen it in the correct format, and they just walked out of there just sort of visibly stunned, because they're like, I've never seen your movie before, even though I've seen your movie 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Coherence on Netflix and I never managed to see it on the big screen. And it would always interest me to see on the big screen, just see that visual and just the awe. But sadly, theatres are like getting more expensive to go to, which is
Yeah,
a
oh, I know, I know. Well, I've been doing this thing lately because we had our 10-year kind of anniversary of the movie. So a bunch of theaters have reached out to have screenings, and I'm going to start doing that this year. I'm going to Atlanta next month for a big screening at the Atlanta Film Festival, and I think I'm going to Colorado and other places that have started showing it again on the big screen.
yeah. I mean, you talked about one way you got your film known was going through the film festivals. Maybe it's different now, but back then, was there any other ways you helped try to promote the film outside of film festivals?
No.
No, not at all. There's
Mm-mm.
nothing like that. Nothing like on social media where you could just, I don't know, do like a quick trailer and like hope it goes viral or something like that.
No.
No, oh, gosh, yeah, yeah, that must be, yeah, that must be really hard then. Like, what can you do in that situation? And you're spending all this money. It's seems a very. I mean, I enjoy films. Don't get me wrong, but it seems a very precarious lifestyle. Like almost a lucky one. Like you have to strike gold once and then you go from there.
Oh yeah, no, it's insane, and it's incredibly precarious, and there's no way to plan for the future. There's no way to know how you're going to pay for groceries in 6 months. There's no way to know if you can have a vacation. There's no way to know any of it, because it's not a job that pays you a set amount. Uh, you might have a great windfall and have tons of money, or you could go 5 or 10 years with no work.
Mm, mm. That's really precarious and so on. But with you, what's next for you? Do you have any ideas for obviously your next season of your TV series? Any next films in the future? Like what's next for you in your work?
Yeah, well, Shatter Belt has another 8 episodes written already, and so we're wondering, if we can either get a platform to support us or get some kind of angel investor who wants to keep it going. That would be amazing. But that's really built to be long term and to generate profit over years, because then you build up a library and you could sell that library later on down the road. So that would be a very smart investment for somebody who had any interest in getting involved in filmmaking. It's also a proven thing because we've already got great reviews out there. Um, the other thing, we're thinking about a sequel to Coherence, and we got a lot of traction when a producer sort of leaked that to the press last year. A lot of companies reached out to us about being involved in the sequel, so we'll see if we can get that off the ground.
Okay, cool. If people want to find out about your work, where can they go?
Well, you can go to jimburkett.com just to see some of my art and stuff that I've worked on in the past. Or just go to try to track down Shatter Belt on a streamer. Go to Just Watch and see where Shatter Belt is playing in your country.
Oh, cool. I'll leave a link to your website on the description of this video so people can check it out. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm fascinated by film, so it's been a really good conversation. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Absolutely, Chris. It was my pleasure.